in answering that question, but I think my first suggestion is to involve more teachers. They are the last people we ask, and they are the last people to be involved in many of these decisions that are taken. It's usually, and NGOs are also guilty of it. That we assume so much that, oh, this solution is gonna work. This is the.
Hello, friends. Welcome to the 360 View from Policy to Practice podcast. This is your host, Shweta Chooramani. As you know, we are doing this series of interviews as part of the design phase of Neiman Global Capital's Pehel Fellowships, exclusively designed for rural government STEM educators. Our mission is to explore how we can bridge the gap between policy and practice in achieving sustainable development goals. In this pursuit, we have with us Swaha Sahoo. Swaha is a country director of STIR Education, an international NGO headquartered in UK with a country office in New Delhi, India. STIR Education focuses on improving learning outcomes for all children by inspiring teacher motivation. We have a perfect guest with us to help us learn about what motivates teachers and how to do it well through innovation. Welcome, Swaha, to our show.
Hi, Shweta. Thank you so much for having me.
So, before we begin, Swaha, I would like you to shed some light on your very inspiring professional career path from being a senior reporter with the Indian Express and the Hindustan Times to being a student in the University of Sussex and then switching into the social development sector.
Um, yeah, I mean, very briefly, I think what drew me to journalism was my passion for writing. I felt like I could write about issues that mattered, and I did a lot of reporting around child rights, health, education policy when I was a journalist. But I think over the 7 years, I was also feeling a little inadequate. I felt like I needed to do more than just write about the issues. And the more I interacted with policy, with government officials, with not-for-profits, I realized that I should be getting my hands dirty. And that is what inspired me to apply for a master's in international education and development. And that was really my uh, foray into understanding theory around development and what it means to work in education. After that, I just happened to be, I got an opening with the Tata Trusts. And that was really a passion project. For 10 years, I worked with children's literature in making Indian language literature accessible to children, especially children going to government schools in India, ensuring that stories build relationship of language and literacy with children. And a lot of work happened in setting up libraries, in building capacities of teachers and enabling teachers to become readers before students could become readers. Think from there, my journey to STIR education was a natural transition because STIR works around intrinsic motivation. And I felt like while a lot of good work is happening within Indian schools and with not for profits, there's a big challenge of motivation across the sector. And I was really keen to understand how do we crack this motivation piece. And that's what really drew me to STIR. And I've been now with STIR for 3.5 years.
That has been a great journey, and as you rightly said, like intrinsic motivation is something that is missing in teachers, and you must have seen this day in and day out in your work today. So I think let's start by defining how do we define intrinsic motivation? In your view, what is it intrinsic motivation contains?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess at some level we all understand when we are motivated. It basically means that we want to do something from within, and we don't really need extrinsic rewards or encouragement. We are doing something because we get the satisfaction out of it. Within our work, we look at the three pillars of intrinsic motivation as autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy is when a teacher or an official or a student feels the control over their own path. They feel like, they have the power to change and do things. Mastery is when they have the opportunity to improve consistently and, continuously within their professional lives or in whatever they are doing. And purpose, which is the most important one, right? Like, why are you doing what you're doing? So why are teachers really teaching? And we feel like once these three pillars come together, a person is intrinsically motivated.
That's very insightful. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And I believe this is replicable to us as well, like to all professionals. Like, why are we doing what
Absolutely.
we are doing? And do we feel happy about it? Like, do we feel we are the master of skills? Very interesting. So, in your view, what do you think? What are the essential components of a high quality teacher training program for education?
Um, I think one of the most important aspects is to understand that teachers already know a lot, right? Teachers, especially teachers who have been teaching for years, they have a lot of lived experiences that needs to be recognized during training, and it needs to be given space while planning teacher training. Um, the second is to create spaces for teachers to learn from each other. To build communities of practice within training, within teacher training. And the third is, of course, to not just stop at training. Like that's one of our big challenges, in teacher professional development, that we have specific days assigned for training teachers across subjects. But the second step, which is following up, providing mentoring, ensuring that there is somebody that teachers can discuss their challenges with, or somebody to appreciate their efforts. That those steps are missing. So we just stop at training, thinking that training is just those 2 or 3 days of workshop that we do, or content that we transact with teachers. But it's a process. Teacher professional development is a process, and we need to go the whole way to ensure that teachers are adequately supported. The other thing is also, what is the role of officials, right, in teacher professional development? Now, India, we have a very interesting dichotomy. We have a separate wing which trains teachers, and a separate cadre which monitors teachers. It's almost as if the academic and the monitoring units don't talk to each other, right? So when you go into the classroom to see whether a teacher is, teaching well, what's the kind of pedagogy, where are the challenges, the lens with which they look at the teacher's performance is quite different and sometimes very non-academic. And that's a challenge that I think a lot of us are trying to solve, including, policy.
Very, very insightful. And I think before we delve further, go deep into the weeds, please explain to us what is the STIR education's teachers training model? Like, how do you do it? Like, what is the model in which you place the teacher's education and then link it with the learning outcomes?
Um, STIR's model has always been one of system strengthening, right? So it's a combination of looking at how we increase motivation across the system. rather than just focusing on the teacher, because the teacher does not work in isolation. What we have realized is that, well, uh, I'm sure it's there in other countries, but in India, we have the national government that makes policies. Then we have the state governments which implement policies, and they have their own set of state policies also. And then we have states divided into districts and further districts into clusters. And at every level, you have one layer that is supporting the implementation of education. Each of those layers decides how a teacher is supported, right? So if we believe that just by training teachers and changing their attitudes and building their motivation, we have solved the problem, then it's incorrect, because the cluster person who's going to school, whose responsibility it is to support the teacher, needs to also change their attitudes, and they need to change their lens from a monitoring to a mentoring lens. The head teacher or the principal of a school, needs to change to be able to support the teacher adequately. The district officials who do a lot of the administration across the districts need to understand what autonomy, mastery, and purpose is, so that flows down to the teacher level. And once the teacher understands these and imbibes it, we combine that with what we call as behavioral changes, right? A system strengthening model where we look at the multiple layers and we look at key behaviors that we want to see at a student level. So for us, it is, safety, whether a child is feeling psychologically and physically safe in the classroom or not. Curiosity, critical thinking, self-esteem. Is a child feeling confident enough to be able to ask questions in the classroom? Is she interested? Is she feeling part of the group? Or is she just sitting quietly lost in her own thoughts with nobody asking her anything? Is she taking part in classroom activities? So if this is the experience that we want to give children, then we have to give similar experiences to teachers. Our teachers are not used to asking questions of officials. Our teachers are not used to asking questions during trainings. Our teachers don't contradict. Our teachers, don't bring up challenges. Don't say that, oh, it's great. This sounds great in theory. But, in my class, I have like children coming from 5 different mother tongues, for example, right? Or first, second generation learners who have no support at home. So will this work? And if it doesn't work, then do I have a place to come back to and then, discuss what my next course of action should be? So behavior change combined with a system strengthening lens is the approach that STIR has been taking for many years in India. And India specifically through Center for Intrinsic Motivation, which is the Indian, entity that has been seeded over the last couple of years, which is really focused on supporting state governments to work on these two aspects.
This program sounds very, very legitimate and very, very required for the kind of education system we have, which is very massive. And as you rightly said, at the state level, at the district level, at the cluster level, and every level, how do we find this synergy between academics and people who are monitoring it, and from monitoring to mentoring? I think that's the key part, and how to do it at a systemic level. So, Swaha, talk to me about how do you do it at the systemic level? For example, let's say I'm a teacher in a sub taluk level. I'm a teacher and I'm teaching science. And so, what services will I receive from state education? And are there any specific grade teachers that you look at, or how do you do the selection of teachers?
See, teachers come much later. The first step is to build ownership with the state government. that we want to work with. In all the three states where we work in India, we have a MOU with the state government. And I think that government needs to be onboarded to address it at a systemic level. To uh, Because our team is very small and the Indian education system is very large. No NGO will ever have the capacity or the human resource to be able to deploy the number of people that is needed to work with teachers at a school level. And it has to be the government's people, right? It has to be stakeholders. And the interesting thing is they are already there. Those cadres are already present in many of the states. What we need to probably tweak is the role, and how they are really implementing, whether they understand what their role needs to be or not. Once the government is onboarded, then we start the process of co-designing the whole program. So what is the need or the gap that the teachers are experiencing is the first step that we undertake, right? The survey is undertaken, interviews are done, and it is the district people themselves who collect this data. It's, along with our team, we support in a lot of the processes. So it's always co-designing. And it is also co-implementation, because it's not us who's going to deliver the training. We will only deliver the training to the first level. It's the district officials who train the block, and it's the block officials who train the clusters, right? Uh, we have a very interesting process of setting up communities of practice, either at the school level or at the cluster level. When I say cluster, basically a collection of schools, some 25 to 40 schools come together to meet, discuss best practices, and also share challenges and plan for a way forward. So we have always maintained that we need to work at the background and government needs to own the program, that people need to own the program. So the cluster resource people have to be strengthened to be able to facilitate a teacher network meeting the way that it should be facilitated, to give that safe space for teachers, to be, to make it interactive so that teachers ask questions, etc. So we do work at multiple levels, but we are always at the back. And we also, for example, let's say we start a project. We are doing a full level of training and mentoring for the district officials. Our team's responsibility is to continue the mentoring, is to make sure that we are present when they are doing the training. We give them feedback on the processes and, what happened, what could be improved. We go along with them for school visits. We observe them observing the classrooms. And then again, we feedback, we have conversations about, this can be strengthened, or this is how mentoring is against what monitoring is, etc. And I think success is when they start changing the way that they behave, or their attitudes, or when their understanding of autonomy, mastery, and purpose expands and they are able to give that space to teachers.
So what I'm learning from this conversation is that while you are working with the government is like the foundation of this partnership. To work at a systemic level, you cannot afford to not work with the government. So having a MOU with the government. And what are the three states that you mentioned that you have MOU with?
At present, Delhi, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu.
Okay. Delhi, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu, and I believe all these one is Union Territory and the two are states. These places are relatively progressive as compared to our priority states, which are Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. I would say where I think the administrative officers are little open-minded and trying innovative practices, I would say. So when you do this mentoring, I think this is more of a mentoring, that helping them do their job well. I think that's what's happening on the field. So, explain to me about what happens in the community of practice. Like, what happens between the teachers when these 25 to 40 schools comes together? What kind of interaction happens? What kind of activities? How long they are? And what does that discourse looks like?
Yeah. So let me give you the example of Delhi so that it's easy to understand because it's a relatively smaller, set of teachers. And here, the network meetings happen at a school level, right? So, network meetings in Delhi have now become part of the timetable in school, right? Every month they happen, and teachers block time, and they know that they need to come for the meeting. Um, we always share certain skills and pedagogy practices that teachers discuss at these network meetings, right? And we've divided our curriculum in such a way that a cycle comprises 3 to 4 network meetings. So 3 months, 3 to 4 months, and approximately 3 network meetings happen, right? So in the first network meeting, teachers come together, they discuss that particular skill set or pedagogy that has come in. They make an action plan for how they will take it back to their respective subjects. Um, Teachers go back, implement that particular strategy, and in the next network meeting, they come back and talk about what worked and what did not. What was their process? How did students respond? Did it work at all? And then they listen to each other, right? Like for somebody it has worked and for someone it has not. So why did that particular teacher succeed? And what is there to learn from his or her experience? There's a lot of reflection. Teachers reflect in terms of what they used to do earlier and how this small change, has changed the way that the students now interact in the classroom or respond. Uh, Sometimes they talk about how it has made things easier for them, right? Sometimes it's linked to earlier trainings, and they talk about how now the training makes sense because you have a specific strategy to link that theory and then to practice it. So there's a lot of reflection and feedback that happens. And because these network meetings are also attended by mentor teachers in Delhi, so the mentors are able to understand and then support the teachers better in follow-up conversations. Right. So this happens, and then based on that, they do an action plan again on what needs to change. Can we strengthen something? Can we tweak something further? Can we ensure that each subject teacher is taking it back to their classrooms because these skill sets are subject agnostic mostly. Uh, and Also based on the state, the skill sets are very specific to the classes that we are catering to. So, for example, in Delhi, it is primarily focused at grade 6 and above, right? So, the content is designed in such a way that it caters to teachers who are teaching grade 6 and above. That's really how network meetings work in Delhi.
And how the teachers are selected, Swaha? Like, because I understand that this is subject agnostic, so it doesn't matter whether you teach science, mathematics, or language. But how do you qualify to get selected in this community of practice?
Yeah. So what happens is there's one teacher who's selected as the teacher coordinator, right? And right when we started the program, we used to call for volunteers. Now the program has evolved so much that the state has a selection criteria. Like teachers have to apply to be an academic coordinator, lead. And it's a very, very comprehensive process in which you look at whether why you want to join as a teacher development coordinator, what the roles and responsibilities will be, whether you'll be able to support other teachers or not. And then the network meeting criteria is that it needs subject representation. So two teachers from each subject come for the meeting to ensure that everybody is present and that um, it is percolating back to the rest of the teachers in each of the subjects.
Okay, interesting. And while you do, this is a very extensive work, and I believe it's this cascade model of training. You have master trainers and then trainers, and at different level. What challenges do you face in your daily day-to-day implementation of this very system-oriented program?
Yeah. A lot of the system-led programs are obviously dependent on people and processes, right? These are the two key things that will either hinder your work or will help it be successful. So we've tried very hard to put in place processes that will stay beyond specific people, whether it is at the level of the NGO or it is at the level of the state. As you know, in bureaucracy, change happens very quickly. And that's one of our big challenges because this work needs time. It doesn't happen in 2 or 3 years because we're talking about behavior change. We are talking about teachers and officials imbibing something so deeply that they believe that that is the way that things need to be done. So, if the official who really believes in this idea, or a key bureaucrat who has believed in that idea and signed our MOU or supported us, if they change, then it's literally like going back to square one. You have to restart conversations with the new leadership. You have to convince them about the model. They may or may not believe it, may or may not be a priority for them. They may want to do something completely different. Those challenges are frequent, irrespective of the work or the approach that you have in the development sector. The the second one is, I think, the scale, the sheer number of teachers and the scale of the geography. Like even within a district, it's so large that we don't have eyes and ears everywhere, and we don't know how much of what is going is really reaching the classrooms and the students. It requires a lot of funding. That's our third challenge, right? Like to now funders want quick results, and especially in India with CSR coming in, it's a annual year game, right? You need to deliver in 9 months to 12 months. So you need to have very short-term outputs that funders can see. So how do we sustain that work over the years with the same set of people? Because funders also want new stakeholders, right? In terms of beneficiaries that they can claim as being impacted. Uh, so these are some of the challenges, I think, of doing system strengthening work. And four, definitely, I believe, is political will. We need leaders who believe that human resource is the most important thing. That we have very good teachers, right? We have teachers who work in adverse conditions and still do a great job. We don't have enough, the right kind of people to support them and the right mindset to support teachers to do better. And that needs strong political will.
That brings me to my next question, which is related to political will. Do you see any expansion plans for state education programs in states like Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, which are supposedly seen as the very difficult states to work in?
Yeah. Um, it's a catch-22 situation. We've been thinking about expansion, and it's always been like, oh, do we get the funding first, or do we get the government, buy-in first? And we've been in many situations where we have had only one, and we've not been able to match the two, right? We've been in situations where we've received the funding and we've had to redirect it to some other work because we couldn't get the government to agree to do something like this, right? And the vice versa is also true. And then we have governments who want to work in difficult districts where this is really needed, where, Odisha, for example, there was a lot of interest in working with tribal schools and never managed to raise the funding for that kind of work. So there is a lot of need to work with funders, with philanthropies to look beyond FLN, and for us to understand that mentoring and motivation are key for us to deliver FLN goals, to deliver goals around social and emotional learning. Uh, it can't be one or the other. They both need to go hand in hand. I think that is something that we've definitely struggled with.
So, Swaha, did you have like I think the right question would be, what is your perception about these two states? Because we are designing this PEHL fellowship in which we want to select government teachers who are teaching science and mathematics and improve their capacity so that the students that they are teaching, they choose a career path in science and mathematics. There are more STEM oriented students and they cater to the future jobs which are going to come from the blue economy and the green economy. So, based on your experience, what do you think are the opportunities which are there but we are just missing them in terms of STEM education?
Um, I see. STEM, even in states that we consider as, more developed than the rest, is far behind, right? Like, if you look at the scientific community, then yes, there's a huge dominance from the southern states in the scientific community. But if you go to rural Tamil Nadu, if you go to the southern districts in Tamil Nadu, or if you go to the northern districts of Karnataka, there are huge challenges of access to basic education, right? So I think as an idea, STEM itself needs to be supported across. And we already have a lot of policies that the government has put in place, no, for supporting STEM education. But there's huge opportunity. A lot more needs to be done. A lot more players need to be doing it. A lot more access needs to be created for both boys and girls. To be excited about STEM. It's even the best of schools we have seen, because I was a education reporter for many years and I've interacted with some of the best schools in Delhi NCR region. We've taken the fun out of science, no experimentation, curiosity, asking questions, math. Like I got a couple of nonfiction books for my daughter to talk, the history of math and, and why zero is important. Nobody talks about why zero is important in the classroom. Uh, and what would happen in life if, let's say, zero wasn't there, right? That instantly captures the imagination of young children. So, and I say the same thing about poetry also. I'm like, English literature classes have killed poetry for young children and even for adolescents. So I think it's just the way there's so much more that needs to be done across subjects and pedagogy.
I agree. I think it's the concept of STEM, like science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, that's need to be sold, and it needs to be sold not just because you want a certain job, but because it's required for you to solve problems, to solve complex problems, which will be there in the 21st century. And you need these skills of creativity, communication, collaboration. and co-creation. And this brings me to a point where, like, what are those tools that we can use for it? Like, let's take an example of technology. What do you think, and what is your experience in terms of integrating technology for these teachers' training program to improve their motivation?
Uh, you know, what maybe it was a year back, I was talking to this tech funder and asking them, explaining the program to them. And we wanted to experiment with chatbot, trying to see whether we can support teachers through nudges. And he said, "Oh, chatbot is passe. It's done for. What's the latest tech that give me something new that you're working with?" And I just realized then that he has never gone to the ground, or he is living in another world altogether. Because tech may be at a certain, inflection point in the world, but we are not there in India, right? Our teachers, our students, us as professionals, like we have so much to learn. The sector, the not-for-profit sector itself needs to quickly, get onto this whole tech and AI bandwagon and make sure that we are adapting many of these big processes. So, and government and government processes, right? Little things like forget pedagogy. Why not assessment? The easier things. Why not assess, attendance? Um, why not free teachers of all the extra work that they need to be done outside of teaching first? Why not automatize all of those? Rather than talking about, oh, can we use tools for teachers to teach? Of course we can, but teachers are already doing a decent job, and let's try to support them as much as possible. I haven't seen there are a few not-for-profits in India who are trying to integrate tech. All right, we've done this pilot this year with chatbot with municipal schools in Chennai, where we've sent inputs through nudges to teachers and let them take those inputs and use it in the classroom and share feedback over WhatsApp. And I think a few others, Rocket Learning's working with communities and parents. Muskan Dreams is also looking at strengthening the tech infrastructure in schools and also the capacity building of teachers. A lot of tech is being adapted in health, in not-for-profits who are working in health. So it's happening, but it's slow. It's slow. Digital infrastructure is a big challenge in our villages and small towns. Even now when we do calls, there's so much of, a challenge in internet and people drop out of calls, etc. So infrastructure plus, training, access to the right kind of digital, and it's a big. I'm saying that it's a big challenge for us because we have a huge young population who, once given access and the chance, would very quickly learn digital. Our teachers would be slower as compared to our students, but we are not there yet. We have a lot of work ahead of us. Policy is there, but there's a huge leap that we need to make towards implementation.
You have really made the great segue into my next question, which is like, what are some actionable steps that policymakers, educators, and institutions can take to improve teacher training?
I would be presumptuous in in answering that question, but I think my first suggestion is to involve more teachers. They are the last people we ask, and they are the last people to be involved in many of these decisions that are taken. It's usually, and NGOs are also guilty of it. That we assume so much that this solution is going to work. we were actually thinking to see if we could have a fellowship where we could get um, a teacher or an official to come and work with us for 6 months and help us design, some of our interventions with the insights that they have from the field, the understanding that they have built over the years. Because they are the ones who need to be, you know, giving the inputs and planning. And and the second thing, teacher training is also very, very outdated, no? I mean, you're still talking about subject training. Where is curiosity, critical thinking, self-esteem, teacher's confidence? Um, where is digital in training? Just saying that all trainings from next year in X state is going to happen in online mode because we don't want to disrupt teachers' timetable and we don't want them to get out of the classroom and miss classes. How much attendance do we have during, and we may have full attendance also. How much present are we during online trainings, full day trainings? It's so, there's a lot of fatigue there. There's no interaction. There's one way communication. That definitely needs to go. I mean, we need vibrant communities. We need teachers to participate, to contribute to these conversations, discussions. We need them to build their professional identities much more stronger. Um, and why we have great ideas in the national education policy, right? Everything that can be thought of is there, but we need to put in place processes to be able to make those into reality.
So let me ask you this question then. What is that one thing that you wish to change in the national education policy of India? I'm sure there are so many challenges, there are so many opportunities, but if somebody gives you a power to change one thing in the national education policy of India, what that would be?
Maybe 20 years back, I would have said, yes, I would want to change policy. Now I know it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. What matters is what you're able to do in implementing, right? Like, even if you
Practice.
are able to implement 5% of what they have said, we would have, done a good job in our lifetimes because these are problems that will not be solved anytime soon. So yeah, no, I don't think I would even bother changing anything in policy because there's so much good in the policies that we already have. We just need to find ways to ensure that, we do what we have said we'll do.
So it basically boils down to the practice. How do we bridge the gap between policy and practice? Policies are there, they are well thought out and done well, but what matters is the practice.
Yeah.
Thank you, Swaha, for all your time so far. And before we close the interview, what message would you like to convey to aspiring teachers and those currently working in the field?
Uh, Persevere, right? I think they're doing a great job. Uh, they are working in conditions that you and I probably wouldn't manage to work in. I have seen such inspiring teachers in the field, and every time I've, met somebody like that, I've come back thankful for the work and thankful for the opportunity to have met, committed teachers. Um, I would say to the good ones, share more because they have the power to inspire other teachers. There's huge power in communities of practice. So it's great to be role modeling what you're doing, how you are, succeeding with your students in the same circumstances that probably other teachers have not. And and teachers don't realize that they are great role models for their peers, for students, for even officials, right? And I would urge for others to give teachers more voice.
giving teacher more voice. And I completely agree with your previous recommendation that you made, that we have to involve teachers in the design phase itself. We sometimes, teachers are the last person who we go and ask for suggestions, and through our Pehel fellowship, during this design phase, we are actively reaching out to some of the teachers and asking them to come on our podcast, so that we have a 360 view from people who are making policies. We have people coming from the government officials as well, from non-profits, from independent think tanks. So I hope we are doing the right thing, and to at least design so that all the components are there in the Behel Fellowship. So, any questions you have, Swaha, for us?
I would just say all the best for the fellowship. It sounds really exciting. And I think both the states that you'd mentioned are also states where I think there is a lot of young energy. They would be excited to get something like this. I'm always happy to help and support in any way that I can. So do reach out if you need anything from our end. And happy to make connections wherever required.
Thank you so much, Swaha. I can't tell you how fulfilling this interview has been with you, and we couldn't have found a better guest speaker to help us learn more about teachers' motivation and the depths of what happens on the implementation level. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Shweta. Thank you so much for having me.